imagine a simple photograph. Something we usually think of as just a record, maybe evidence.
Right, a screenshot of reality.
But what if that photo wasn't just documenting reality? What if it was actively creating it?
That's a powerful idea.
Yeah, what if it became an instrument of control? Even like a weapon in the hands of a secret police force.
That's exactly what we're exploring today.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
It's a fascinating twist, isn't it? Because we're not just talking about your standard mugshots or, crime scene photos.
Okay.
This deep dive, it's going to reveal how the Soviet KGB really pushed the boundaries of photographic manipulation. They used it to construct a very specific image of the enemy.
Turning ordinary people into threats.
Exactly. Turning ordinary citizens into perceived threats, and even turning something like religious belief into, well, organized crime.
Wow. Okay, so where are we getting this information? What are the sources for this deep dive?
They come straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Declassified archives of the Security Service of Ukraine.
Which used to be part of the KGB itself.
Precisely. So we're looking at actual documents, internal reports, and crucially, the photographs themselves. From cases spanning the 1930s right through to the 1950s.
And our mission here, what are we trying to understand?
We want to figure out how these visual materials were used, not just to, document supposed crimes.
But to actually create a particular version of reality, the state's version.
That's it, the state-sanctioned version. And this is where it gets really compelling.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's get into it.
So if you look at the official manuals, the formal side of Soviet criminalistic photography, on the surface, the KGB seemed to follow standard procedures.
Like what kind of procedures?
Well, guidelines for, fixing crime scenes, taking photos of evidence, producing mugshots. Pretty standard stuff, actually, based on methods developed in Europe much earlier.
Right, so they had the rule book. They looked like they were following it.
But here's the crucial twist. Alongside these standard protocols, the KGB made extensive use of photography in what they called agent operational measures.
Agent operational measures, what does that mean?
It means hidden cameras, surveillance, documenting things they intercepted or confiscated secretly.
Ah, so not just standard evidence collection. This sounds different, more proactive.
Exactly. It wasn't just about gathering evidence after the fact. It was about something far more insidious.
Okay.
If we zoom out a bit here, think about what a photograph does. Susan Sontag talked about this, how photographing something is a way of appropriating it.
Right. It gives you a sense of knowledge about the world.
And therefore power. John Tagg built on this with his idea of the regime of photographic truth.
Regime of photographic truth.
Yeah. The idea is that KGB photography wasn't objective, obviously, but it also wasn't just crude fakery either.
So what was it then?
It was a sophisticated tool designed specifically to produce and transmit a certain discourse of truth, using their ideological biases to basically create a version of reality that served the state.
So this connects to the bigger picture. This isn't about finding facts. It's about manufacturing perception.
Precisely. Manufacturing perception.
And what was the ultimate goal of manufacturing this perception?
It was crystal clear. Shape the image of the enemy, the class enemy or the national enemy.
Why? To make them look bad.
Well, yes, but more than that. It was to enhance the KGB's own authority, to build up state power. They even portrayed the Chekist, that's what KGB members called themselves, as this kind of Soviet Superman.
A hero figure.
Yeah, capable of finding and stopping these supposedly powerful, dangerous enemies. Enemies that, frankly, often existed more in the state's imagination than in reality.
So who were these enemies they were focusing on with this photographic manipulation?
Primarily specific religious groups, ones outlawed by the Soviet state as harmful.
Like who?
Movements like the Catacomb True Orthodox Church,
Yeah.
Jehovah's Witnesses, Pentecostals, groups like that.
Okay, and there was a distinction, right, between legal groups and these ones.
A crucial one. Legally registered religious groups. They fell under a different body, the Council for Religious Affairs. But these banned minorities, the so-called religious underground, they were put directly under the secret police, the KGB.
And this wasn't happening in a vacuum, was it? There's a historical backdrop here.
Oh, absolutely. These enemies often emerged from really brutal periods, like the liquidation campaigns against peasants who resisted collectivization.
And that resistance often had religious overtones.
Deeply interwoven. You had peasants, priests, monks warning about the apocalyptic red dragon, the Antichrist, seeing the Soviets in biblical end times terms.
Wow.
And you had these figures, vagrant clergymen, popular prophets, people known as erodivi, the holy fools, or boliashi, the holy invalids.
What were they saying?
Things like the communists were putting an antichrist stamp on people's foreheads, or even, believe it or not, that they were recycling old people for soap. Really extreme stuff, born out of desperation and fear.
Creating these small, spontaneous religious groups, wild parishes.
Exactly, wild parishes or hut groups. Decentralized, hard for the state to track, let alone control.
Which brings up a really important question. How did the state turn religious belief, something personal, into a political crime they could prosecute?
That's the key legal maneuver. The sources are clear. People weren't charged for their beliefs. That was technically protected, sort of.
So what were they charged with?
Their alleged actions. Actions as supposed members of an insurgent, counter-revolutionary, ecclesiastic, monarchist underground.
That's quite a mouthful.
It is. But it provided the legal cover. It let them prosecute people for religious practice, but framed it as political subversion. A neat, if terrifying, trick.
It reminds me of that point the historian Lynn Viola made, that the Stalinist state didn't just create the conditions for resistance.
It also generated the lens and language of resistance.
And even produced most of the sources we now have about that resistance. It's like they created the problem, defined it, and documented it all themselves.
It's an almost perfect echo chamber of control. And the visual material, the photos, were absolutely critical in this.
How so?
They helped establish the religious dissenter as a deserving target of state repression. They created a visual typology.
Like putting them in a category.
Exactly. Placing them in a gallery of rogues alongside other stereotypical foes. The spy, the terrorist. The photo became an ideological blueprint, the first visual step in making an imagined threat seem real and recognizable.
So these photos weren't just sitting in a file cabinet. They had a life, a purpose beyond just being there.
They had a social biography, as some scholars put it. They weren't standalone items. They were inserts within text files, explicitly part of the story.
Underlining the written claims.
Precisely. Their physical existence was tied to their meaning and how they were used. And that meaning could shift depending on the context.
But wait, weren't these files top secret? How can something top secret have a social life? Seems like a contradiction.
It does, doesn't it? But Christina Vasilescu has written about this idea of the spectacle of secrecy.
The spectacle of secrecy.
Yeah, the idea that secret wasn't just about hiding things. It's also about creating an aura, a fascination. The secret files, she argues, actually won the battle over propaganda because people were so intrigued by what was supposedly hidden.
So the secrecy itself made the fabricated plot seem more real, more potent.
In a way, yes. The allure of the forbidden gave the official narrative extra power.
That's a really interesting point. And once these photos served their initial purpose in the secret file, did they just stay there?
Oh no, their journey continued. They were often recycled for wider propaganda.
Like in newspapers or films?
Show trials, propaganda films, media campaigns, absolutely. But also internally, within the KGB itself.
How were they used internally?
Circulated between different case files, maybe collaged into illustrations for training manuals, reprinted in internal newsletters, even put on display in exhibits like the Chekist's office.
Wow. And could their meaning change during this journey?
Definitely. Sometimes just a scribbled note on the photo, front or back, or moving it to a completely different file could fundamentally alter what it was supposed to signify. It helped cement the fabricated story.
And then, much later, after the Soviet Union collapsed.
Post-89, post-91, these archives started opening up. And these same documents, these photos, began a whole new journey into the public sphere.
Acquiring a totally different meaning.
Completely. Now, they became witnesses for the prosecution, but this time the prosecution against the dictatorship, shaping new memories, new stories about life under that regime. A powerful reversal.
It really is. So, focusing back on the individual pot in the system, what did all this mean for them? Let's zero in on that critical moment, the arrest.
Yes. Arrest was the point where the KGB really unleashed its full arsenal of photographic techniques to transform a person into an enemy.
Okay, let's look at a specific case. Father Seraphim.
Yes, Father Seraphim. His birth name was Daniil Shevtsov. He was a priest in the Catacomb Church movement.
And he was discovered when?
Mid-1940s, in the Kharkiv region of Ukraine. This was after World War II, when a period of relative religious freedom during the German occupation had actually led to a resurgence of these popular religious movements.
And what happened to him?
The police located and destroyed his underground monastery. This was in a place called Chuiv in July 1945, and the photos we have from the police file, they're literally the only visual record that exists of this place.
So what do the crime scene photos show? Anything unusual?
On the surface, they follow the standard police procedures we talked about. Environment photos of the house, overview photos showing the hidden entrance, central photos of the altar area, detailed photos of items they confiscated. Looks like routine forensic work.
There's always a but, isn't there?
There is. Then you get to figure 1. This photo shows Father Seraphim himself, seated, surrounded by all his religious items, vestments, utensils, icons.
Was that normal? To pose the suspect with the evidence?
It was a common stage practice, deliberately done after the arrest. The whole point was to visually underscore a direct link between the accused and the supposed crime, literally placing him amidst his own guilt, as defined by the state. It's a visual accusation.
Okay, so it's staged, but the items are real, right? They're his actual religious thing.
Exactly, and this is where it gets really insightful when you analyze the grammar of the image, the way meaning is restructured. Nothing in that photo, figure 1, is technically fake. He is with his actual religious items.
Right.
But compare it to figure 2. That's a pre-arrest photo we have of Seraphim, looking dignified in his proper monastic clothing.
Okay.
But look back at the police photo. The religious meaning is systematically negated. The whole semantic order is disrupted.
How so? What do you mean?
Look how the items are treated. Icons aren't revered. They're just heaped together. Some are even nailed up crudely. His vestments aren't worn. They're just hanging on a bare cord. Altar cloths are carelessly draped over a cart.
Ah, I see. It strips them of their sacredness.
Precisely. And Seraphim himself, he's transformed. From a respected priest in the pre-arrest photo to just looking like an elderly peasant man in the police photo. And his sacred objects. They're no longer symbols of faith. They're just proof of his stance against the state. The police image deliberately suppresses the original meaning to impose a new criminal one.
That's chilling. Okay, let's shift focus slightly. What about the mugshot? We think of it as just an ID photo, but you're saying it was more than that.
Much more. It wasn't just record keeping. It became an accusatory image in itself, part of a process to systematically strip away identity.
Tell me more about that.
This is what's called signalétic photography, the standard 2-shot mugshot. Full face, profile, plain background, minimal writing.
Designed for identification, right.
Yes, but its purpose within the KGB system went further. It was designed to strip away any non-criminal social identity, to erase the person's history, their life outside this moment of arrest. It was about dehumanization, reducing them to a type, a category.
And Father Seraphim's mugshot, figure 3, does it show this?
Absolutely. Notice he's identified only by his birth name, Daniel Shevtsov. His monastic identity, Father Seraphim, is erased.
And they used other techniques, too.
Yes. Alongside the photo, they used Bertillon's spoken portraits. That was a system developed by a French criminologist, Alphonse Bertillon.
For identifying people through measurements and descriptions.
Exactly. Precise physical measurements, detailed textual descriptions. It's all part of this drive for total categorization, total control over the individual's identity.
So these weren't portraits in the artistic sense at all?
Not at all. They were accusatory images. Their goal was to reduce the person to a non-person, to contribute to this idea of a new representation of society, one made up of disciplined, categorized bodies.
And the photos themselves often look so still, so calm.
That stillness is deceptive. It often concealed, as the source material notes, enormous violence. The physical and psychological struggle at the arrest. The whole point of the mugshot was to erase that struggle, to present a facade of compliant capture.
But that violence, that struggle, sometimes it couldn't be erased, right? Sometimes it broke through.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really compelling case, the Kiev group from 1952.
Okay, tell me about them.
This is a group of 23 believers. They had refused to join the collective farms, refused to pay taxes, wouldn't send their kids to Soviet schools, basically opting out of the Soviet system.
How did they respond when confronted?
Their response to everything apparently was just, God knows. Simple, defiant faith.
And when the police came to arrest them?
They didn't go quietly. Their resistance was active, dramatic. They barricaded themselves inside their houses. They tore off their clothes. They cried. They sang religious hymns. They refused to walk or talk. Some went on hunger strikes. They offered zero confessions, no denunciations. It was a real headache for the secret police, completely messing up their narrative of easy arrests.
So how did the photographs capture this?
Well, look at figures 4A through 4. These show two different versions of the arrest photos for some of these individuals.
What do we see?
You can clearly see the believers actively resisting the photo itself, Some are intentionally closing their eyes, others are turning their heads away, some look like they're singing right at the moment the picture is taken.
And crucially,
Crucially, in some of the versions, you can distinctly see the hands of the police officers physically holding them still, trying to force them to face the camera.
the violence is visible.
It is. But here's the really fascinating part. The police laboratory tried to fix this.
How?
They attempted to correct these quote-unquote tainted photographs.
Yeah.
They crudely shaded out the policeman's hands with ink or pencil.
Seriously, just scribbled over them.
Yes, very crudely done. Which raises a really important question. Why bother with such clumsy editing? Why not just retake the photo?
Good question. What does it tell us?
It reveals something profound about the institution itself. An internal fear of failure.
Fear of failure, the KGB.
Yes. A fear of disclosing what might be seen as a failed case of enemy unmasking. They were desperate to conceal the inherent violence of the process, the fact that these arrests weren't smooth operations against willing criminals.
So the crude editing is actually a sign of weakness, a crack in the facade.
Absolutely. It's a stark visual testament to the internal anxieties and contradictions within the Soviet system, even as it projected this image of absolute, effortless control.
That's a powerful revelation, the regime's own insecurity showing through in the very act of manipulation. Does this fear of failure manifest in other ways we see in these archives, beyond just the photos themselves, or perhaps hint at a deeper vulnerability in totalitarian systems?
It absolutely does. You see it in the obsessive record-keeping, the constant need for validation, the harsh punishments for perceived errors. This internal tension is a recurring theme. The violence had to be hidden because it fundamentally contradicted the propaganda of a, willing populace and an omniscient benevolent state. So these little imperfections, like the crude shading, they're really significant cracks in that facade of total control.
Okay, so we've seen how they manipulated individual photos, dealt with resistance. Now, how did they scale this up? How did they create the idea of a large, organized threat?
Right, because as we said, they couldn't just prosecute someone for believing something, and they often had to hide the messy reality of the arrests.
So what was the solution, legally and visually? They needed to build a case for organized crime, right? A centralized, subversive threat, even if one didn't really exist in that form.
Precisely. Remember that legal loophole. You couldn't prosecute for belief, but you could prosecute for anti-Soviet and counter-revolutionary propaganda. So the task became transforming these often isolated prophets, monks, and priests into anti-Soviet agents in the official record. That provided the justification for repression.
And visually, how did they show this organization?
The secret police's really innovative and, frankly, quite chilling solution was the photo collage.
Collages, like scrapbooking.
Sort of, but with a much darker purpose. They would literally cut and paste mugshots, confiscated photos, maybe group shots, and rearrange them.
To achieve what?
To underscore the would-be reality, as the source puts it, of a centralized, interconnected anti-state network. They were manufacturing an organizational structure, linking people who might barely know each other into a fabricated web of conspiracy.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Look at Figure 5. It's called the WEFC collage. It was actually part of a 1930 manual for the OGPU that was an earlier Soviet secret police force.
What does it show?
It arranges photos of 38 true Orthodox believers to make them look like a structured counter-revolutionary group. They even took photos that weren't police mugshots and crudely shaded the backgrounds to make them fit the aesthetic.
Wow. Any others?
Figure 6 is even more complex. It visualizes a supposed hierarchical network of monks and nuns, specific groups like the Sambosviatsi, who were self-consecrated, and the Iowanites, followers of a pre-revolutionary priest.
How did they construct that one?
They mixed mugshots with pre-arrest photos. The pre-arrest photos highlighted the religious affiliation, the robes and symbols, while the arrangement of all the photos together created this composite image of an organized hierarchical enemy.
So they went from individual manipulation to group fabrication. Was there another step? Did it get even more abstract?
Oh, yes. The next, maybe the ultimate step in this process of dehumanization and abstraction was what some scholars call the KGB panoptic diagram.
Panoptic diagram, what's that?
Here, the individual enemy vanishes almost completely. No faces, sometimes no names. People are reduced to an abstract form, maybe just a dot or a number within a huge network chart.
Just connections on paper.
Exactly. It reflects this underlying philosophy they seem to have, that social connections, rather than individuals, form the basic unit of socialist society.
So the network itself was the target.
In their view, yes. To know the network was to know the truth. The danger wasn't just individual dissidents, it was the potential webs they formed, which would challenge the state's monopoly on social organization.
And what did these diagrams look like?
They often visually mimicked official Soviet organizational charts, with boxes and lines showing hierarchies. They presented these often loosely connected religious groups as if they were centralized, subversive political organizations.
Complete with reporting structures.
Yes, showing local cells reporting up to regional leaders, maybe culminating in central commands in Moscow or Leningrad, even if none of that structure actually existed in reality.
Are there examples of these diagrams too?
Absolutely. Figure 7 is a network diagram of the True Orthodox Church from 1931. It shows lines, direct and indirect links, supposedly spanning the entire USSR, with Moscow and Leningrad right at the top, crowning the scene.
And figure 8.
Figure 8 from 1930 is even more ambitious. It depicts this giant web supposedly linking all sorts of alleged groups, religious dissenters, political oppositions, even counter-revolutionary elements living in exile abroad. It's a visual representation of total paranoia and control.
It really does sound like Foucault's panopticon idea, the all-seeing eye.
It's a chilling parallel. Visibility in this system becomes this perverse guarantee of order. By creating these diagrams, the KGB could claim to see everything, to understand the hidden threats. It allowed them to anticipate and intervene even before a crime is committed. Pure power through controlling perception and information.
So summing this all up, the impact of KGB photography wasn't just about taking pictures.
Not at all. Its profound impact was far beyond documentation. It was fundamentally about knowledge production.
Creating their own knowledge.
Yes, systematically distorting reality to create and reinforce their own regime of truth. And in doing so, it served to build the state's own power, making the enemy seem vastly more organized and dangerous than they often were, especially with these marginal religious groups. It really shows you the internal mechanisms of the creation of an apparatus of totalitarian control and state violence.
And yet, and this seems crucial, the very manipulations, the crude edits, the staged photos, they also reveal something else, don't they?
Yeah, they absolutely do. As we saw with those shaded hands over the crying women in the Kiev case, it reveals the regime's own anxieties, that deep-seated fear of failure.
Their desperate need to conceal the violence, the coercion, the fact that they couldn't always control the narrative or the people as completely as they wanted.
Exactly. The mask slips, even if only slightly.
Which leaves us with a final thought.
It raises a really important question, I think, for you, our listener. When a state puts so much effort into actively distorting reality just to maintain control, what does that tell us about the truth it claims to represent?
And what about the silenced stories? The real lives of the people they tried so hard to erase or reshape into enemies.
And perhaps even more relevant today, consider how easily images, even seemingly simple ones, can still be manipulated to shape narratives, to influence what we believe. How do we navigate that in our own world?
Subscribe for more.